Good afternoon. Welcome so much to the webinar today. Hope you have your pizza with you here soon. So I'm joined today by Dennis Kloster, one of our senior consultants, and we're going to dig into simplifying, securing, and automating your server management. So we have some good information lined up for you, and we'll jump right on into that here very shortly. A little bit of housekeeping as we go here. So the first is hopefully you have your pizza. But we'll start with the agenda. So Dennis will be looking at kind of managing on-prem servers and specifically using a tool from HPE, looking at their Compute Ops Management. And we'll be going into that and also be demonstrating that as well. So, and then we'll be doing Q&A at the end. So for your pizza, just take a note of Julie Dellinger's email address on the screen. So if you don't have your pizza already and you've asked for one, just be patient a little bit. They may be trying to find your address or get up to the right floor in your office building. But you can, if you still haven't gotten your pizza here shortly, just reach out to Julie and she'll try to help you out with that. A little bit of housekeeping. So audio is in presentation mode, so you can hear us. But unfortunately, we can't hear you, but we do that so any noise and sounds that maybe where participants are don't come through to the whole group. But you can reach me throughout through the chat tab right there and go to webinar, as well as through the questions tab. So if you jot your questions down, we'll save those up to the end, and then I'll read those questions out to Dennis, and he'll be able to respond to those after the presentation piece. This presentation is recorded, and we'll send you a copy of the link to the recording as well as the PDF of the presentation, so you'll have that at the end. As well as there's a quick evaluation. So if you can take a moment to do that, let us know what additional resources that you may need, as well as how do we do. And we'll draw one of those completed evaluations, and you get an Amazon $50 gift card. Hopefully that makes it a little bit more fun. And while many of you are familiar with System Source, I'll kind of go through this quickly. So we've been around since 1981. And serving IT professionals from South Central Pennsylvania, all through Central Maryland and down into the Washington, D.C. area. And so a lot of folks first come to us when they need to acquire new technology. And while we do end-user computing work, most of our work is happening in the data center, whether that's going to be on premises, which will be part of our focus today, or in its cloud variant. So a lot of our work is now happening in Amazon, both at Amazon Web Services as well as at Microsoft Azure, as well as other places that you can put your compute, storage, security types of resources. So whether that's in software as a service, it could be in shared co-location centers, hosted in other types of facilities. So wherever you put your data, we're kind of, it doesn't matter to us. We can help design, implement, and secure your resources and your data wherever it is put. So our consulting does that work under improvement as well as our cloud services. We also do training, have about 600 classes on our website at any one point, and that's across all those data center types of technologies, all the Microsoft stack, all the VMware work, all the Cisco related work, security related work, all those types of things we have training classes for, and they're all available remote as well. And Present is professional AV, so all the Teams rooms, WebEx rooms, Zoom rooms, so all the large monitors, microphones, speaker systems, projectors, all those types of things that make those modern really workspaces work. And then we're all using those kind of those hybrid tools today. That's the kind of work that happens in our presentation systems group. And finally, we maintain all these things either kind of on an as needed basis under service and support, including after hours. You can just go through our main number and follow the voice prompts, or managed services where we are the IT department for dozens and dozens of clients in this region. Okay, just a little bit about some upcoming events. So a number of things coming up. So one next week is going to be on Microsoft Azure. So if you're evaluating a move to Azure, that may be an interesting one for you. And I will drop the registration links in the chat while Dennis is speaking. The week after that, we have one on really choosing between an understanding between a SIM, a security incident management tool, versus having an outside party kind of manage that similar kind of tool in response. So you can either kind of do it internally, or you could get an external party. Often questions about why would I do which one, but we'll dive into that on the 21st. Then up on the 2nd, we'll be doing a drill down into kind of on-premises storage refresh. So if you're looking to can do an on-premises refresh, that would be an interesting one for you. And we'll be drilling down into some of the HPE technologies in that session. That's what we have coming up. And with that, I think we'll hand the reins off to Dennis, please.
All right, thank you, Chris. Okay, so as Chris said, I am going to talk all about HPE Compute Ops, and specifically about GreenLake, because HPE Compute Ops is a component of GreenLake. And then I'm going to do a demo using one of our clients who I've set this up for, that has graciously allowed me to log in using their credentials, and we'll just take a look and see what's going on. So first of all, just real quick, Compute Ops is a component of GreenLake. So HPE GreenLake is, if you've never heard of it, I think they actually 2 years ago or 2 Super Bowls ago actually ran commercials during Super Bowl about it. It's the HPE CEO is pretty open about the fact that they staked their job on the success of this, because they went all in. What GreenLake is a cloud-based management system for everything HPE. So whether it's located really anywhere, whether it's in your data center or distributed all over, it can manage it. And it is, as I said, pretty much everything HPE. So your storage, your Aruba switches, your ProLiant servers or other types of servers. Compute Ops is the server component of HPE GreenLake. So, as I said, now we're talking specifically servers. We have the ability to kind of manage and view and look at all types of reports, but as well as actually quote unquote do stuff. Whether your servers are in your data center in Baltimore or in China or Russia or North Carolina, wherever, as long as we have internet access, HPE GreenLakes, and again in this case we're talking about Compute Ops with servers, can manage those. So this is kind of a high level, and again I'm going to show you this in person, but this is what Compute Ops looks like. So what it allows us to do is it's very very simplified view. So obviously green good, red not so good, and orange is a warning, which can mean a bunch of different things, and I'll show you that. But we can just kind of take a look at our server health, the ILO security status, firmware compliance, and anything else that we set up that we're interested in. By default, these are the 3 things. And the ILO security status, let me just touch on this real quick. Anybody who's bought an HPE server for, 20 years probably at least, is familiar with ILO. So ILO is in most cases a dedicated NIC port, and it's always allowed you to do all kinds of things and update firmware from there and give you lots of information. The big thing for most people is that it allows you to connect to the server remotely. And yes, there's lots of other ways to connect to servers remotely, but if the operating system is crashed, you're not going to be able to connect through anything that relies on an operating system. So it is, you can actually watch the server boot. You can change boot settings in the BIOS and all kinds of things. So ILO's been around for a while. In the Compute Ops environment, ILO is how your server speaks to GreenLake. It does it all through the ILO. Okay, so obviously we're talking about connecting your servers to a cloud. So security is going to be very, very important. I'm going to run through this slide pretty quickly because the next slide actually goes into much more depth. At the HPE Compute Ops Management level, there's authentication, right? So I log in, Kloster at syssrc.com, boom, that's my email address. And then my workspace, which is a GreenLake term that's associated with my user, then based on the role that I have been assigned, so I can have people that in my organization that I can only assign, read only, or maybe they can only update ILO firmware but nothing else. So it's very, very granular. And then at the HPE GreenLake Cloud, you can do things like, okay, hey, I want you to have, two-factor authentication, or we're going to use SSO or whatever. And then everything, as it says down here, is secure. So secure authenticated connection from your device to the GreenLake, and then your devices, again, in this case, we're talking with Compute Ops Management, we're talking about the server. So in this case, it's the ILO that is doing the secure authenticated communication to GreenLake. And as I said, this next slide kind of shows this a lot better. So the end users logging in, doing their authentication. It's up to you if you want to do single factor, 2FA, single sign-on using a third party. You can do that. Then based on who you are is what you're going to see inside of GreenLake. Again, obviously we're going to have an owner, a high-level management account that can do everything. And then, in larger organizations, you might delegate, Bob can only do this, and Tom can only do that, and Jane can only do this. In small organizations, you may only have 2 or 3 IT people, and they may have rights to everything. And then, as I said, the servers communicate with GreenLake via the ILO. It says here ILO 5/6. I will say it's very, very particular that as newer versions of ILO firmware come out, you have to be running not necessarily the latest, greatest, but you can't be multiple revisions behind of the ILO firmware. So if you have a new server and you buy it and it ships, let's just say, let's be real, sometimes hardware manufacturers ship things that don't always have the latest, greatest firmware because it's been sitting in a box for a while, and you try to set it up with Compute Ops and it's just not connecting. The first thing I would do is check and say, hey, is my firmware on the ILO the latest, greatest? Once you update that to the latest, greatest, you'll probably have no issues connecting. All right, so ILO security risk monitoring. By default, one of the 3 or 4 things that it shows you out of the box is ILO security status. Is it at risk? Is it secure? And one of the things you can do, and in fact, in the demo, I'm gonna show you. There's only 2 servers in the demo, and we have them both set to ignore risk. One of the reasons why is if you look here off to the left where it says ILO security status, and in this case, this server generic server that it's showing here it says the default SSL certificate is in use. Quite honestly, most people just keep the default SSL certificate. Nobody's certainly going to go buy an SSL certificate specifically for ILO. In this case, the organization that we're doing the demo for they do not have an internal certificate authority, so we just left the default SSL certificate. But it might give warnings. Your password is not as complex as it should be. You have SNMP version 1 enabled. Secure boot is disabled. A lot of these things, quite honestly, are default ILO settings that they expect you to change. Okay, so one of the things that's really cool with this is, and again, this is for a larger organization, but the initial server setup, you can use, it's called token-based onboarding, where you basically set up your settings that you want for Compute Ops, create a token with it, and then for follow-on systems, you just dump the token down, and then it uses an automated script to onboard the servers using those settings. Then once they're able to communicate to GreenLake with those settings, because you use the token, again, you could do it all manually server by server if you chose to, you can create a server group and set configuration policies for things like the server workload profile. So if, those of you that don't know, by default, HPE ProLiant servers have a server workload profile, and it's not set to max performance. I don't remember the exact term they use, but I think it's like balanced power consumption or something like that. So basically, it's sacrificing some of the performance in order to save power on your electrical bill. Depending on what that server is doing, that may be a major issue. We actually had probably 10 years ago. We had a client that had a very large RDS, remote desktop services farm, and they could not figure out why the performance was just not acceptable. And we were brought in, and after a little bit of digging around, we saw that they were using the default server workload profile. And once we changed that to max performance, all the issues went away. So if you only take one thing away from this webinar, I would honestly change that server workload profile on pretty much every server. But anyway, so I can set a configuration policy, firmware baseline, ILO security, anything that you can set inside of the the server BIOS, the setup of the server that you would go through on a server by server basis. You can set a policy and just apply it to all the servers, and then just assign the servers to that group, and the policy flows down to it. So because this is cloud-based, I'm sitting in my kitchen at my house in Pennsylvania, and I'm going to log in to GreenLake into the cloud, and I'm going to be able to look at the servers that are, in this case, are in Owens Mills or Reisterstown. So it's all obviously remote because it's cloud-based. I can get to it anywhere, and it's not just read-only, because one of the things, I'm not actually going to do it, but I'm going to show you some of the things that we can do that I personally think make this technology, this offering, so kind of interesting. Key automation. So if something goes wrong, what can we do? We can set up email alerts. We can have automatic cases opened up with HPE support. We can do automatic ILO firmware upgrades, which I actually have set up for the client that we're going to take a look at in a minute. The ILO firmware upgrades, all it does is reset the ILO. It does not reboot the server, so it's non-disruptive. So I just have it so that anytime there's an ILO firmware update available, go ahead and install it. I'm not entirely sure this is the most interesting thing unless you're really, really concerned about sustainability and carbon emissions, but if you are, it's there. So there's some default reports that show up. You have the ability to just look at one of them, sustainability, as it shows here, how much carbon emissions, how much energy consumption, what's the cost of the energy for these servers. And then the other thing you can do, which is actually pretty neat, especially if you have a larger organization and you're looking to do some type of server refresh, and you're like, okay, I don't know how many Gen 10s or how many Gen 9s per alliance do I have? The Gen 9s are no longer going to be supported. I need to replace those. How many of them do I have? You can go ahead and take a look at this, and you can do a lot more than that. You can take a look at, how many different processor models, how many servers do I have that are Intel, blah, 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 memory, all kinds of different storage things. So you can really look at anything that's hardware related on the servers that Compute Ops Management is managing and get all kinds of information for that. All right, this says Q&A. We're not doing the Q&A. We are going to just kind of take a look at this in action. And of course, it logged out. So we're going to log into GreenLake. And we are going to log in. And once we log in, it's going to take us to the last place that I was. And the last service I was in was the data services console, which if I have time, I'll show you, but that's not what we're looking at now. So if I click on services here, we'll see that the only two services we have set up for this organization is Compute Ops Management and data services. We're talking about Compute Ops Management. We're going to hit launch. And now we are going to see that screen. So the first thing that we'll look at a very, very high level, the most important thing is I have two servers and they're all okay. I have two servers that are ignore risk. As I said, we set those at risk because we did not We're just using the default SSL certificate. I think there was one other thing that we chose not to change. If I look down here, here's my 2 servers. Okay, now what can I actually do with this? So what I can do is if I go up here and I click on my servers, and now I check on this box and I hit actions. So I can do a whole bunch of things that are blah, 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 not that interesting. To me, the most interesting one is update firmware. How many people actually update their server's firmware on a regular basis? Because I'm betting it's probably none of you or maybe one. The reason is it's a pain in the butt, quite honestly. It's a pain in the butt to find the firmware on HP's website. It's a pain in the butt to install it. I tried to do this manually probably about a month or 2 ago for a customer that was having a major issue, and they did not have Compute Ops Management. And every time I downloaded the firmware from HP's website, it kept telling me it was corrupt and I couldn't use it. And I was downloading older versions, the newest, latest, greatest. So let's just pretend this is running the newest version of the firmware because I have updated it. But if I wanted to update the firmware, I could hit this checkbox. It would go through and say, hey, let's pick the firmware. It'll tell you this is the latest, greatest. So I'm going to obviously want to go with the latest, greatest. If there was patch bundles available, I would do that. Hey, do I want to update the HPE drivers and software? I can hit that checkbox. Do I want to downgrade my components to match the baseline? Do I want to power the server off for some reason? If I hit next, it should come through and tell me that I can't do it because it's already running the version. And I think if I hit start the update, which I'm not going to do because it is already running this, it's gonna basically fail and say it's already running. The reason I'm not going to do it is in case I'm wrong and it already, I don't know, it already, yeah, so it would fail. But this is a firmware update does require a reboot. So in this case, these are VMware hosts that are running virtual machines. It does not do the VMware quote unquote stuff for you. So you would have to move the VMs, vMotion the VMs off to another host. You'd want to put the host in maintenance mode and do the firmware update. What I recommend, since quite honestly, a lot of servers today are virtualization hosts, whether they're running VMware or Hyper-V, do this when you do your patching. Anybody who's running VMware, I hope you're aware that on, was it Tuesday, VMware announced a very, very serious security vulnerability. Probably one of the most serious vulnerabilities that VMware has ever had. So if you're not aware of that, please, 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 please patch your VMware host immediately. If you're not sure how to do that, you need help, reach out to us, be more than happy. We've probably patched well over 100 clients' ESXi servers in the past 4 days. But while I was doing the patching, since I already have the servers in maintenance, if they're VMware servers, they're already in maintenance mode, I go here and I do the firmware update as well, like I said, because it does require a reboot. To me, this is the most valuable part of the Compute Ops Management. Cancel, yes, cancel. If I wanted to update the ILO firmware, I could do that, but instead, let's just take a look at this, configure auto. So I have it turned on to automatically update the ILO firmware. So I know my ILO firmware is always going to be up to date. So again, that is not disruptive. It just resets the ILO. It doesn't actually do a reboot of the server itself. Let me just real quick click through all these. So this is just going to show you all the inventory that you have. Under manage, it's going to allow us, as I said, to create groups. So I could create groups and then put settings to the group. So that's where I could say, hey, we have to have this baseline of firmware. I want my ILO settings to be this. I want that performance for max performance for the baseline. I would set all that in the settings and then apply it to put my servers in a group and apply it to the group. Firmware baselines we already kind of looked at. Here are the reports that I mentioned. And so if we look at a server inventory, gotta run it first, run it report. This shouldn't take too long, but you can see here, here's all the, kind of activities that are going on inside of GreenLake. So if we see here, yesterday we're collecting inventory. I updated the firmware on the stuff last night. So all of the activity, both that is initiated in GreenLake, but as well as what's going on to the servers, shows up here. Let me just real quick. I don't know if the report's finished, but no, it's not finished yet. So anyways, once it's finished, we'd have the report. We could take a look at, take a look at that. I'm going to show you real quick, and I'm running out of time here, but I just want to show you, even though it wasn't something that we advertised we're going to do, but I just want to show you data services console real quick. So data ops manager, if anybody has a Nimble or an Electra, which are HPE SANs, this is what it looks like. Again, all kinds of information. We're using 13% of the SAN. If I want to look at latency, want to look at IOPS, want to look at throughput, I want to look at the volumes at a volume basis. What's the read op? What's the latency? What's the IOPS throughput at the volume basis? All different types of things that are available. So, if you buy an HPE device, a new HPE device now, it's going to have the tie-ins. If you bought it a year or 2 years ago, it probably has the GreenLake tie-ins. But anything you buy new should have those GreenLake tie-ins. And you can see there's a lot of value to it. All right, I covered a lot in a very, very short amount of time. So if there are any questions, Chris, you can fire them off to me and I'll do my very best to answer them.
There are no questions at this point. So
okay.
You covered a lot. I think you covered it well. So at this point, we'll want to say thank you very much to Dennis for the information. Thanks everyone for joining us for our 30-minute webinar today. Normally there's 60 minutes. We're trying to get some shorter topics in here, like the one today. Hopefully you enjoyed it and got some benefit from it. So we'll wish you a good weekend and give you back part of your afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks again to Dennis.
Thanks, everyone.